carry that out. And that is a really big marked contrast to almost every other leader in the Western world who don't keep their promises.
I'm not sure if you heard some of what I was saying as you approached me. I was talking about that latest polling, which is more supportive than it was last year of this visit, because it is a working visit and not a state visit. So do you think that more people are separating the office of the President of the United States from the incumbent?
No, I think they are, and rationally so they should. And surely the grown-up position is, whether you like Trump or not, the relationship between us and America is important. We're the biggest reciprocal investors in each other's countries, and we need to have a good relationship.
What do you think can be achieved in this visit? Do you think there will be any progress towards a trade agreement post-Brexit, or is that perhaps too ambitious?
How can there be a trade agreement if Mrs May is signing us up to regulatory alignment with the European Union? So there's a big problem here. I mean, we've got an American administration, not just Trump, but the other officers, who are very pro-British, very pro the special relationship, and it's us saying, I'm sorry, we can't do it.
I'm just being told, forgive me if I've got the details wrong here, that you went to the US Embassy or to the Ambassador's house and were turned away. Is that correct, Mr. Farage?
No, I was coming to see you.
Okay, so that hasn't happened. You haven't been.
No, I came to see you.
Okay, and are you meeting the President? Are you planning to meet him?
No, I mean, Downing Street made it a red line that he's not to meet me on this visit, so that makes it rather difficult.
What about the private part of the visit? Are you meeting him in Scotland?
No, I'm not.
You're not playing golf with
I've met him many times since he became President. You know, I'm a supporter of his. I think he is reshaping the world in many ways. He may even have got NATO to come to its senses over the course of the last 24 hours.
The President made some big comments on NATO, didn't he? He said that the US was contributing something between 70 and 90% of the NATO budget, which isn't the case. It's more like 22% on direct spending towards NATO. But I mean, do you think he's going to undermine his own stated aim of putting America first, making America great again by trying to tear down some of these alliances?
I think you all misunderstand this completely. You know, he set out at Davos what America's global position is under a Trump administration. America first, but not alone. You know, all he's asking for is people who are NATO members to pay the membership fee. There are 29 members, and only 5 of them are paying the membership fee. It's the same request that Obama made twice.
Absolutely, as we have reported. But it's the way he does it. He's very combative, isn't he?
Yes, he isn't going to change. That's who he is. You know, he's a businessman who's come into politics from the outside. He says it as he sees it. He doesn't care who he upsets, but he gets things done.
Finally, is the UK going to get anything out of this visit?
Well, I would like to think that the Prime Minister will say, look, I'm sorry, we're not yet in a position to get our relationship closer, but we are going to deliver Brexit, a proper Brexit, not a checkers Brexit, and we will be heading on to a closer relationship. I hope that comes out of it. I fear the reality is there'll be quite a confrontation between the American administration, Trump, and May and her government, because the Americans can't believe, frankly, what a mess we're making of Brexit.
Nigel Farage, thank you very much. And in fact, asked about the Chequers agreement, the US ambassador to the UK, Woody Johnson, a few days ago, when it was put to him what sort of impact this might have on attempts to get a trade agreement with the US post-Brexit, he said, well, you know, it's up in the air. So it wasn't the most positive comment, perhaps, that Theresa May could have hoped for. Much more from Regent's Park here in central London throughout the day. Right now, it's back to you, Martine.
Anita, thank you very much. See you later. The government has published more detailed plans for how it proposes trading with the EU after Brexit. They involve what's being called a common rule book with the EU on goods and have already led to 2 cabinet resignations. But the new Brexit Secretary, Dominic Raab, has called the plan credible and innovative. Our chief political correspondent Vicky Young has been discussing the contents of the new white paper with Brexit Minister Robin Walker.
So we finally have the white paper that was agreed by the Cabinet, although which led to those 2 high-profile resignations, of course, from David Davis and from Boris Johnson. Now, the document is talked about as a principled and practical set of proposals, and it talks about the economic partnership that there will be between the EU and the UK after Brexit, and as we heard before, about accepting the common rule book on goods but not on services. Let's discuss its contents Brexit with the Brexit Minister, Robin Walker, who joins me now. First of all, that idea that services are not included in that arrangement, what's the thinking behind that?
Well, I think anyone who reads the white paper will see that there are actually a number of suggestions for services and for new arrangements between the UK and the EU on services. But what we're saying is that the rulebook on goods, which has been built up over many decades and has remained static for a long time, which is something that businesses in the goods sectors depend on for complex supply chains and is vitally important for allowing the frictionless border between Northern Ireland and the Republic, is something which we're hearing very clearly from businesses. They want us to be able to continue with. They want to see that continuity in complex supply chains, which will be very important for jobs up and down the country. The UK is a world leader in services, and we do need the regulatory flexibility to remain a world leader in that space, to make our own rules and be able to trade with the wider world. And so we've taken the view that we need new arrangements between the UK and the EU that support services, allowing, for instance, mutual establishment, allowing labour mobility for key service providers, but that also recognise the independence of the two systems.
Can I ask you about immigration, the end of freedom of movement that's being talked about a lot? It was such a crucial issue, of course, during the referendum. The suggestion here is, though, that EU citizens might be allowed to come to the UK without visas to do paid work in limited and clearly defined circumstances. Can you explain that?
Yeah, sure. This is very clearly the referendum result was a decision that we had to take control of our immigration system, but the UK should in future set the rules as to who is allowed to come and settle in this country. But of course what we need to then do is we need to make sure that we are setting rules that meet the needs of our economy. And so what we've set out in the proposals in this white paper is a labour mobility framework which will allow, for instance, intercompany transfers, allow key expertise to be brought into the UK where it is required, and yes, allow visa-free travel for tourism, which is of course an enormous benefit for our economy. But
arrangements for EU citizens.
What is clear is that the UK will in future set the rules as to how EU citizens can come to this country and what rights they have with regard to settlement. And that's not a process that my department controls or is defined in this white paper. That's something for the immigration white paper that Sajid Javid is working on for later this year.
What do you say to people like Ian Duncan-Smith, who has got up in the House of Commons this afternoon and said that he has deep misgivings about this, and because he voted to leave the EU, not to half leave?
And I'd say to Ian, who I have great respect for, is to read the detail of the white paper, reflect on the fact that it means we are taking control of our laws, our borders and our money, that the UK will very clearly be leaving the European Union and then forging a new relationship with our neighbours. But we need to do so in a way that is practical and that protects jobs in this country and that meets our wider commitments, including those on the border with Ireland. I think this package of measures achieves all of those things, and that's why I think it's a practical and sensible way forward. That's also why key Leave campaigners such as Dominic Raab are coming forward and supporting it.
Okay, Robin Walker, thank you very much indeed. Now, throughout the document it talks about this being a compromise. Of course, the danger with compromises is that you could end up not pleasing anyone at all.
Vicky Young. Well, our reality check correspondent Chris Morris is here. So let's break some of this document down, or at least one part of it, and start talking about the impact on goods that this white paper is proposing.
Yeah, I mean, as you suggest, the economic relationship is just one of 4 chapters, but it is the one which people are focusing on, and goods is something that people have been talking about a lot. It was in the Chequers statement last Friday, and we've got more detail now. The UK is basically saying we want a free trade area in goods. It's pretty close to membership of the single market for goods, but for obvious political reasons they're not calling it that, because the UK is saying we would sign up to a common rule book with the rest of the EU. Common rule book in effect means we'll agree to the rules that the EU sets, but when 27 other countries meet, we won't have a say necessarily in making those rules, because the problem is if you diverge from just 1 or 2 rules here and there on something like animal health or food safety or the way that lorries are made, then suddenly at borders you have a problem and you don't have frictionless trade, which is the whole purpose of signing up to an arrangement like that on goods. So there is, I think, a fear among Brexiteers that we're giving away too much, but I think the government is arguing it's the only way this can be done. If you don't like this, what's the alternative?
What's the proposal then for services?
Services is an interesting one because this accounts for 80% of the UK economy, and yet the government wants a looser relationship on services than on goods. That's partly because it thinks it can then go out and make deals around the world. But I think the problem there is how does it still maintain this very close relationship on services? We're not just talking about financial services, we're talking about professional services, technical services, anyone who sells a service across a border? How do you retain that relationship with the rest of the EU? And what the government had previously wanted was something called mutual recognition, where you recognise my standards, my rules and regulations, and I recognise yours. This white paper basically admits that that's not going to fly with the EU. And what it's asking for is a new kind of relationship, arguing that it's got to be something bespoke, something special, because the City of London is so important to the rest of the EU, not just to the UK.
And briefly about immigration?
Not a huge amount on immigration, a little bit. It says very clearly free movement will come to an end. What it doesn't really say in detail is what's going to replace it, and we're waiting for another white paper on immigration. But it does hint at some, I guess they would see it as generosity, the rest of the EU might not see it as generosity, but saying, for example, that we would have a mobility framework, which is usually a part of a trade deal, which would, for example, allow people coming for tourism or short business trips to arrive here with no visa at all.
Chris, thank you very much. Time for a look at the weather forecast now with Ben.
Good afternoon. There's no doubt that the weather has turned a bit more mixed over the last few days. Some areas have seen quite a lot of cloud.